The sound that broke me was not the preacher's final prayer. It was not the soft, weeping melody of the organ. It was the sharp, definitive click of my daughter-in-law's heels on the marble floor of the funeral home, walking toward me as I stood over my son's casket. I was holding on to the polished oak to keep from falling into the earth with him. My Jamal. My firstborn. My heart lying cold in a box. A hand, cold and smooth, touched my arm. I turned. There stood Chantal, my son's wife of 8 years. Her eyes were dry. Her makeup was flawless. The scent of her expensive perfume, something with sandalwood, felt like an invasion in that sacred space of grief. She leaned in, her voice a venomous whisper meant only for me. Miriam, stop crying. It's becoming a spectacle. I stared at her, unable to process the words. She continued, her grip tightening. The will is clear. Pack your bags and get out of my house, now. You are a guest there, a guest who has overstayed her welcome. My house. The words were a physical blow. The room swam. The faces of our family and friends gathered to mourn my child blurred into a watercolor of pity and shock. In that moment, my grief was eclipsed by a humiliation so complete, so brutal, I felt I might disintegrate. Thank you for being here with me today, for creating this space where we can share stories that carve into the soul. If you are new to this circle, I welcome you. Please subscribe and join our community. And I would be so honored to know where you are listening from, your city, your quiet corner of the world, so share it in the comments below. Now, let me take you back to the life I built before it was stolen from me in a single cruel afternoon. My name is Miriam Jefferson. For 38 years, I was a wife to a wonderful man named Samuel. And for 35 of those years, we built a life in a house we loved on a quiet, tree-lined street in Charlotte, North Carolina. Samuel was a contractor, a man who believed in building things to last. In 1989, we used our life savings, $45,000, to buy a vacant lot in the Wesley Chapel neighborhood. We spent 2 years building our home, board by board, dream by dream. I remember the smell of sawdust on Samuel's overalls, the weight of a hammer in my own hand as I helped him frame the porch where I would later hang my ferns. This house was our sanctuary. It was where we raised our son, Jamal. He was his father's son, strong, kind, with a brilliant mind for numbers. He became a successful financial analyst, a man I was immensely proud of. When Samuel passed 5 years ago from a sudden heart attack, the foundation of my world cracked. But Jamal was my rock. He moved back home to help me, to be my anchor in the storm of my grief. He met Chantal a year later. She was beautiful, ambitious, a real estate agent with a sharp eye. I saw the way she looked at our family home, not as a place of love and memory, but as an asset. But Jamal loved her, and so I opened my heart. I welcomed her as the daughter I never had. When they married, I was happy. To help them, I even suggested they save their money and live with me. The house was too big for one person, I said. I thought we were being a family. I thought we were helping each other. That was my first and most tragic mistake. The shift was subtle, like a change in the barometric pressure before a storm. After Samuel died, I had downsized my life. I drove an old Honda. I used coupons. I found joy in simplicity. I had no need for flashy things. Chantal mistook this for poverty. She began making comments. Miriam, that car is a death trap. Or, we really need to update this kitchen. It's so dated. She'd say we as if the house was already hers. But the true change came after Jamal's accident. A car crash on Interstate 77. A phone call that shattered my universe. In the numbing fog of those first days, Chantal took charge. She presented it as helping her grieving mother-in-law. "Let me handle the funeral arrangements, Miriam," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "You're in no state." She chose the casket, a sleek, modern design Jamal would have hated. She picked the flowers, white calla lilies, cold and formal. When I softly suggested we play his favorite song, A Change Is Gonna Come by Sam Cooke, the one his father used to sing to him. She shook her head. "That's too heavy, Miriam," she said, not looking up from her phone. "We need something more uplifting for the guests." For the guests. I felt myself being erased from my own son's farewell, but I was too broken to fight. I told myself she was grieving too, in her own way. The day before the funeral, I was in Jamal's old room, holding his high school football jersey, when I overheard her on the phone in the hallway. "Yes, a prime property in Wesley Chapel," she was saying, her voice bright and businesslike. "Easily $425,000. And with the life insurance, I'll be completely secure. It's a fresh start." A cold dread trickled down my spine. The life insurance. Jamal and I had a small policy on each other, a $50,000 thing we'd taken out years ago to cover final expenses. Was she talking about that? It felt premature, colder than the funeral home's air conditioning. The day of the funeral, I dressed in a simple black dress. I felt 1,000 years old. I stood by my son's casket, my hand resting on the cold wood, pouring every ounce of my love into that final touch. That's when I heard the click of her heels. That's when she told me to stop crying. And that's when she told me to get out. In the stunned silence that followed her command, I didn't speak. I couldn't. The humiliation was a fire in my cheeks. I saw my cousin Beatrice, her hand flying to her mouth. I saw the pity in the eyes of our pastor. Chantal mistook my silence for submission. She saw the tears on my face and thought they were a sign of defeat. But, my dear friends, what Chantal didn't know, what her greed had blinded her to, was that the house she was throwing me out of had never, not for a single day, belonged to my son. The deed, signed and recorded on a bright autumn day in 1991, bore two names, Samuel Jefferson and Miriam Jefferson, and now it bore only one. And in a fireproof lockbox in the basement, tucked beneath my wedding album, was a document she had never bothered to ask about, a trust. The Samuel and Miriam Jefferson Family Trust. Its value was just over $850,000. She had just evicted the owner. The silence in the car on the way home from the cemetery was a heavy, suffocating blanket. Chantal sat in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead, her posture rigid. I sat in the back, feeling like a child being driven home after a scolding. The world outside the window, the familiar streets of Charlotte, the towering oaks of Wesley Chapel looked the same, but everything had changed. When we arrived at the house, my house, she didn't hold the door for me. She walked in first, her heels clicking a triumphant tattoo on the hardwood floors Samuel had laid. "I'll give you until the end of the month," she said, not even turning to look at me as she dropped her keys into a ceramic bowl on the entryway table. My table. "That's more than generous. I've already started looking at listings for you. There's a lovely senior apartment complex over on South Boulevard. I think you'll find it more manageable." I stood in the foyer, my black purse clutched in my hands like a shield. The smell of Samuel's favorite leather polish still hung in the air. "Chantal," I began, my voice trembling, "this is my home. Jamal would never—" She spun around, her eyes flashing. "Jamal is gone, Miriam, and he left me in charge. He left everything to me." She said it with such finality, such conviction, that for a terrifying second I believed her. Had my own son, in the chaos of life, forgotten to protect his mother? "The deed," I whispered. "The deed is in this house, and as his widow, it belongs to me now," she stated, as if explaining something simple to a slow child. "Along with his life insurance, the $150,000 policy. I need that money to secure my future. You have your little Social Security, you'll be fine." $150,000? The number was so large, so specific, and so wrong. Our policy was for $50,000. The confusion must have been plain on my face. "Don't look so surprised," she sneered. "Did you think he'd leave it to you? To spend on coupons and thrift store finds? He knew I would use it to build a real life." That's when the final piece of her cruelty clicked into place. She wasn't just misinformed. She had constructed an entire narrative where I was a frugal, helpless old woman and Jamal was her wealthy benefactor. She saw my grief as weakness, my simplicity as poverty. I didn't correct her. I didn't scream. A strange calm settled over me. I just nodded, a slow, weary motion of my head, and walked past her, down the hallway toward my bedroom. I heard her, a sound of profound irritation. Good. I'm glad you're finally being reasonable. Alone in my room, I did not pack. I sat on the edge of the bed Samuel and I had shared for 35 years, and I let the truth wash over me. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a calculated takeover. She had waited until I was at my most vulnerable, until the one person who could contradict her was gone, and she had struck. My tears were gone now. In their place was a cold, clear anger. It was a clean emotion, sharp and focused. It gave me strength. I thought about the trust. Samuel had been so proud when we'd finalized it. "This will protect you, Miriam," he'd said, his large, calloused hand covering mine. "No matter what happens, you and Jamal will always be safe." He was a builder, and he had built a fortress around his family. Jamal knew about the trust, of course. He was a beneficiary. It had paid for his master's degree, helped with his wedding, and provided him with a steady, supplemental income of $3,500 a month. He was a good saver, a smart investor. He never needed to touch the principal. He lived comfortably, and Chantal assumed it was all from his salary. He was a private man about money, and he never felt the need to explain to his wife that his financial security was rooted in his parents' lifelong work. She saw the comfortable life and credited only him. She saw his kindness to me and labeled it charity. That night, long after the house was dark and silent, I crept down to the basement. The air was cool and still, smelling of concrete and memories. In the corner, behind boxes of Christmas decorations and Jamal's old childhood toys, was Samuel's old fireproof lockbox. My hands were steady as I dialed the combination, our wedding date. The latch opened with a soft thunk. Inside, on top of our marriage certificate and Jamal's birth announcement, was the folder I was looking for. I carried it upstairs to the kitchen table, the heart of our home. Under the soft glow of the pendant light, I spread the documents out. There it was, the declaration of trust, the list of assets, the bank statements, the balance. $852,176.42. And then I found the document I had nearly forgotten about, Jamal's life insurance policy from his job. Not the small one we held on each other. This was a $150,000 policy. And the beneficiary was not Chantal Williams Jefferson. The beneficiary was the Jefferson Family Trust. She had been planning her future with money that was destined to flow right back into the trust she was trying to steal from. The irony was so profound it stole my breath. I sat there as the sun began to rise over Charlotte, painting the sky in hues of rose and gold. I watched the light fill the kitchen I had designed, illuminate the cabinets Samuel had built, and I made a decision. I would not fight her with shouts and accusations. I would not give her the satisfaction of seeing me unravel. I would fight her with the very things she thought I lacked: wisdom, patience, and the unassailable truth written on paper. I picked up my phone. I didn't call a family member. I didn't call a friend. I called a woman named Beverly Watkins, a formidable estate attorney who had been a friend of Samuel's. Her office was in the sleek Overstreet Mall downtown. "Beverly," I said, my voice calm and clear for the first time in weeks. "It's Miriam Jefferson. I need your help. My daughter-in-law is attempting to illegally evict me from my home." There was a pause on the other end. Then Beverly's voice, sharp and ready. "Tell me everything, Miriam." And I did. Beverly Watkins met me in her office on the 10th floor of a glass building in downtown Charlotte. The view of the skyline was immense, a world of steel and ambition that felt far removed from my quiet street. Beverly, a tall, elegant woman with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing, greeted me with a warm, firm handshake and a cup of tea. "Miriam," she said, her voice a low, comforting rumble, "I've reviewed the documents you brought. They are ironclad. She spread them out on her massive mahogany desk, just as I had on my kitchen table. The deed, the trust documents, the life insurance policy. Chantal has no legal standing whatsoever, she continued. The house is yours, free and clear. The trust is yours. The $150,000 insurance payout is an asset of the trust, which means it is yours to control. She has been operating on a fantasy. I took a slow sip of tea, the warmth spreading through my cold hands. She believes it, Beverly. She believes it so completely, she told me to pack my bags at my son's funeral. Beverly's eyes hardened. Then it's time for a reality check. What do you want to do, Miriam? We can serve her with a formal notice to vacate. We can file a quiet title action. We can process the insurance claim and simply let her discover the money is gone. The law is entirely on your side. I looked out the window, at the city my Samuel had helped build. I thought about respect, about what it means to earn it, and what it means to demand it. I don't just want her out, Beverly, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I want her to understand. I want her to look me in the eye and see the woman she underestimated. I want her to hear the truth in front of the people she's been lying to. Beverly leaned forward, a slow smile spreading across her face. You want a confrontation. I want a conversation, I corrected her gently. A one-sided conversation where we present the facts. And I want witnesses, the same people who heard her call me a burden. Where? Beverly asked. Her office, I said without hesitation. Premier Realty. Let her colleagues, the ones she's been boasting to about her inheritance, hear the truth. Let them see what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. Beverly nodded, a glint of admiration in her eyes. A public accounting. It's risky. It could get messy. It's already messy, Beverly, I said. She made it messy when she desecrated my son's funeral. I'm just bringing the cleanup crew. We planned it for Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. Beverly would have all the certified documents. She would do the talking. I would simply be there, a silent, steady presence, the calm in the eye of the storm I was about to unleash. The next few days were a study in surreal tension. Chantal moved through the house with the air of a soon-to-be queen. She brought home paint samples, spreading them out on the kitchen counter. I'm thinking agreeable gray for the living room, she'd say, as if I were a visiting relative whose opinion she was humoring. It's very neutral. Will help it sell? I would just nod and say, that's a thought. I spent my time in my garden, pulling weeds, my hands in the soil Samuel had tilled. I found a strange peace there. I was not packing, I was planting. I was tending to the things that were meant to last. The Sunday before our meeting, Chantal brought 3 of her real estate colleagues to the house for an unofficial walkthrough. I was reading in the sunroom when I heard them come in. The bones are incredible, one woman gushed, but this sunroom is a waste of space. You could easily enclose this and make a proper home office. That's the first thing on my list, Chantal agreed. And this kitchen, all these wooden cabinets, so dark. I'm thinking white shaker quartz countertops. They were dissecting my life room by room. I stood up and walked into the living room. The 4 women fell silent. Chantal, I said, my voice even, I didn't know we were having company. Just a little professional consultation, Miriam, she said, her smile tight. No need to bother yourself. One of the women, a blonde named Jessica, looked uncomfortable. We were just leaving, Mrs. Jefferson. Nonsense, Chantal said sharply. Miriam understands that this house needs significant work to reach its potential. Don't you, Miriam? You've let it fall into such a state. The words hung in the air, cruel and false. My home was immaculate, filled with a lifetime of care. I looked at Jessica, then at the other 2 women. I gave them a small, sad smile. It's always wise to know exactly what you're working with before you start making plans, I said. Don't you agree? I left them standing there and returned to my sunroom, to my book, to my peace. The battle lines were drawn, the stage was set. Tuesday morning, I dressed with care. I chose a simple navy blue dress, pearl earring Samuel had given me for our 25th anniversary, and a calm demeanor that I wore like armor. Beverly met me outside Premier Realty, her briefcase containing the instruments of truth. We walked into the bustling office. It was all modern furniture and bright screens, and there was Chantal at her desk, showing a young couple photos of a condo. She looked up, and her confident smile froze, then shattered when she saw Beverly and me. The room didn't go quiet, but I felt the energy shift. Heads turned. "Chantal," I said, my voice carrying in the open space, "we need to talk." The air in the real estate office grew still and thick. The clicking of keyboards ceased. All that remained was the low hum of the central air and the pounding of my own heart, a steady drumbeat of resolve. Chantal's face was a canvas of confusion, then irritation. "Miriam, now is not a good time. I'm with clients." The young couple at her desk looked between us, uneasy. Beverly Watkins stepped forward, her presence commanding and immovable. "I'm afraid this can't wait, Ms. Williams. I'm Beverly Watkins, attorney for Mrs. Miriam Jefferson. We need to clarify some pressing legal matters regarding the property at 2147 Magnolia Avenue." The use of Ms. Williams instead of Jefferson was a deliberate first subtle blow. Chantal's cheeks flushed. "This is highly unprofessional," she hissed, standing up. "Whatever this is about, it can wait." "It's about the ownership of the house you're attempting to sell," Beverly said, her voice clear and carrying. She placed her briefcase on the edge of a vacant desk and clicked it open. The sound echoed in the quiet room. "And the $150,000 life insurance policy you believe you inherited. That got everyone's attention. I saw Jessica, the blonde agent from the walkthrough, lean forward from her cubicle, her eyes wide. "I don't have to listen to this," Chantal said, but her voice had lost its force. It was the tremor in it that gave her away. "You do, actually," Beverly replied evenly. She held up the first document, a certified copy of the deed. "This is the deed to 2147 Magnolia Avenue, recorded October 12, 1991. The grantees are Samuel Jefferson and Miriam Jefferson. Upon Samuel's death, full title passed to Miriam Jefferson, sole owner, no mortgage. Jamal's name appears nowhere on this document." Chantal stared at the paper as if it were written in a foreign language. That can't be right. David inherited it." "He did not," Beverly stated, her tone leaving no room for argument. She held up a second set of documents. "These are the property tax records for the last 20 years, all paid from an account in the name of Miriam Jefferson, not Jamal Jefferson, not Chantal Williams, Miriam Jefferson." I stood silently, my hands clasped in front of me. I watched the confidence drain from Chantal's face, replaced by a dawning, horrifying understanding. Her colleagues were no longer pretending to work. They were openly watching, their expressions a mixture of shock and morbid fascination. "The life insurance," Chantal blurted out, a last desperate grasp at her narrative. "David's policy from work. That's mine." Beverly gave a slow, pitying shake of her head. She pulled out the final, crucial document. Slowly, "The beneficiary of Jamal's $150,000 group term life insurance policy is not you, Ms. Williams. It is the Samuel and Miriam Jefferson Family Trust." She let the words hang in the air for a moment before delivering the final blow. "A trust of which Mrs. Jefferson is the sole trustee and primary beneficiary. The current value is approximately $852,000. A collective soft gasp went through the office. I saw Jessica put a hand over her mouth. Chantal looked as if she had been physically struck. She staggered back a step, bracing herself against her desk. The color had completely left her face. "No," she whispered. "He wouldn't. He didn't." "He did," I said, speaking for the first time. My voice was soft, but it cut through the silence like a knife. He respected his father and me. He understood that everything we had, we built together, for our family. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see a monster. I saw a young woman who had been so blinded by greed and her own shallow assumptions that she had gambled everything and lost. The humiliation she had tried to inflict on me was now her own, and it was 10 times more profound because it was played out before her peers. "You let me believe," she stammered, her voice breaking. "You let me make a fool of myself." "I tried to talk to you, Chantal," I replied, my tone not unkind but firm. "At the funeral, you handed me a timeline for my own eviction. In my own home, you called me a burden. You did not ask, you assumed, and you were wrong." Beverly closed her briefcase. The definitive click signaled the end of the proceedings. "Ms. Williams, you are currently a guest in Mrs. Jefferson's home. She is granting you 30 days until the 15th of next month to vacate the premises. The same courtesy you offered her." The young couple at Chantal's desk stood up abruptly. We're going to look elsewhere," the man said, unable to meet Chantal's eyes. They practically fled the office. The spell was broken. The other agents suddenly found their computer screens intensely interesting, but the damage was done. Chantal's professional reputation, built on trust and competence, had just been utterly dismantled in front of her entire industry. She sank into her chair, her head in her hands. The victory I felt was not sweet. It was solemn. It was just. Beverly touched my elbow. "We should go." As we turned to leave, Chantal's voice, small and broken, called out, "Miriam, I'm sorry." I paused at the door and looked back at the wreckage of her pride. "I know you are, Chantal," I said quietly. "But sorry doesn't put back what you broke. It just acknowledges the pieces." We walked out into the bright Charlotte morning, leaving the silence of that office behind us. The sun was warm on my skin. I felt a weight I had been carrying for 2 months finally lift from my shoulders. But the story wasn't over yet. The ripples of that morning were just beginning to spread. The silence in the car as Beverly drove me home from the real estate office was entirely different from the silence after the funeral. This silence was not heavy with grief or humiliation. It was filled with a profound, echoing clarity. I had spoken my truth, I had stood my ground, and the world had not ended. It had righted itself. Beverly glanced over at me. "You were magnificent, Miriam," she said, her voice full of respect. "Thank you, Beverly. I couldn't have done it without you." I looked out at the city. I just did what Samuel would have expected me to do. He always said, "Baby, don't you start a fight, but you sure better finish one." When I returned to the house on Magnolia Avenue, it felt different. The walls seemed to stand straighter. The light through the windows felt warmer. It was no longer a place of siege. It was my sanctuary again. I walked from room to room, my hand skimming over the familiar surfaces, the mantel, the banister, the kitchen counter. I was not saying goodbye. I was reacquainting myself. Chantal did not come home that night, or the next. When she returned 2 days later, it was with a subdued, hollowed-out demeanor. The arrogant click of her heels was gone. She moved through the house like a ghost, avoiding me. I heard her on the phone in her room, her voice strained. "Yes, I need to put in my notice. Personal reasons. No, I won't be able to close my current listings." The consequences were unfolding exactly as Beverly had predicted. The story had spread through Charlotte's tight-knit real estate community with the speed of a wildfire. A reputation once broken is very hard to mend. Who would trust their biggest investment to an agent who couldn't even verify the ownership of the home she lived in? Over the next 3 weeks, I gave her space. I didn't gloat, I didn't engage, I simply lived my life. I had my tea in the sunroom, I worked in my garden. I began the process of claiming the life insurance money for the trust, a straightforward procedure that now felt like an act of reclamation. On the morning of the 14th, the day before her deadline, a moving truck pulled into the driveway. I watched from the living room window as two movers loaded Chantal's belongings. She had a lot of things: designer clothes, expensive art, all the trappings of the life she thought she was entitled to. It didn't even fill half the truck. When the truck pulled away, she stood in the foyer for the last time, a single suitcase by her feet. She looked young and lost. "I'm going to Columbus," she said, not meeting my eyes. "I have a friend there. Maybe I can start over." I nodded. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Chantal." She finally looked at me, and her eyes were red-rimmed. "Why didn't you tell me? About the trust? About the house?" "I tried, in my own way," I said gently. "But you were so sure of what you saw. You saw an old woman in a simple dress and an old car. You never saw me. You never saw the life Samuel and I built. You only saw an asset." Tears spilled down her cheeks. I thought I was securing my future. After losing David, I was so scared. "I was scared too," I admitted. "But we choose how we handle our fear. We can let it make us cruel, or we can let it lead us to kindness." She picked up her suitcase. "I am sorry, Miriam. For everything. For the funeral, that was unforgivable." "I forgive you," I said. And I found, to my surprise, that I meant it. The anger was gone. In its place was a quiet pity. But forgiveness doesn't mean I have to forget, or that there are no consequences. It just means I'm choosing not to let your actions poison my heart anymore. She nodded, a sob catching in her throat. She turned and walked out the door, closing it softly behind her. The click of the latch was not a sound of victory, but of closure. The house was mine again, truly mine. The silence was no longer lonely. It was peaceful. In the weeks that followed, I began to truly live again. I didn't change the house. I didn't need to. Every scratch on the floor, every mark on the doorframe was a love letter from my past. I had my cousin Beatrice over for dinner. I joined a garden club. I started volunteering at the local library, reading to children. The trust fund ensured I would never want for anything, but my happiness came from the life I was rebuilding, not the balance in the account. One afternoon, I was in the basement, going through Samuel's old things. I found a box I hadn't opened in years. Inside were Jamal's childhood drawings, his report cards, a little clay handprint from kindergarten. At the very bottom was a sealed envelope with my name on it, in Samuel's handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. "My dearest Miriam, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and I'm sorry for that. But I need you to know something. You are the strongest person I have ever known. This house, this life, it wasn't built by my hands alone. It was built by your heart. Don't you ever let anyone make you feel small in the home you built. You stand tall, my love. You always have. Yours, forever, Samuel." I held that letter to my chest and wept. But this time they were not tears of grief. They were tears of gratitude for a love that had built a fortress around me long after he was gone. The war was over. I had won, not by destroying my enemy, but by refusing to be destroyed. I had reclaimed my home, my dignity, and my peace. If my story touched you today, what would you do in this situation? Tell me in the comments. I truly love reading your thoughts. Also, let me know where you're watching from. I'm always amazed how far these stories travel. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe. There are many more stories coming your way. Big hugs, and see you in the next chapter.